All right, we are live. So good afternoon. It's July 5th, 2020. Another edition of Soapbox Sundays. How's everybody doing out there?
Doing well. Doing well.
Good. Great.
Good. Awesome. Awesome. Well, everybody know me as Cool C, the one. We got Dan in the house, and as you see, we've got a lovely guest on the show. We'll give her a chance to introduce herself and explain why she's here in just a moment. So wave to the fans out there.
Hey, everybody.
Thank you. So as I said, it's July the 5th, 2020. We just had the 4th of July yesterday. Hopefully everybody had a good 4th of July. It was kind of weird because I know on the 4th of July, for me personally, I pride myself on making, 3 to 4, sometimes 5, maybe 6 stops and grabbing the plate to go from most places. I know there's been a couple of times, and we all have an uncle that was known for keeping additional Tupperware in his vehicle as he visited during the holidays. So it was most definitely tough this year because for the most part, people are starting to kind of fall back, and we'll get into some corona numbers here in just a second. But people are starting to kind of fall back, and we really didn't have the holiday. It was kind of on pause. So just interesting. We'll get into how that felt for everybody. But before we do that, Dan, let's let the people know who we are and how they can get in touch with us.
We are Athena Protection, and this is Soapbox Sunday, brought to you by Athena Protection, which is a security company and private investigation. You can reach us on athenaprotections.com on our website. You can reach us on our phone number at 800-966. Oh, damn, hold on, I forgot the number, man. 851-4866, there it is, I'm tripping today. That's a 1-800-951-4866. Or you can reach us on any social media platform at Athena Protection Service. It's one of them days.
Awesome. And as always, make sure you hit that like button and share for us, please.
Definitely like.
Defense, I think, Dan, it's been a while since we've had a guest on the podcast. So, got us a little distracted. So as our listeners out there can see, we've got a lovely young lady here, Lolo the model. And hey. So before I give her a chance to tell everybody who she is and what she has going on, we've talked about this in the past that we want to take our platform and give our friends and listeners the opportunity to promote anything that they have going on. So with that being said, Lolo the model, we reached out to her and she said, I'd love to come on. So with no further ado, I'd like to introduce you guys out there in our viewing public. I'd like to introduce you to Lolo the model. How's it going this evening?
Hey, everybody. It's good. I'm great. It's great. It's a great day outside.
Great. Well, I don't know what happened to her video feed. Did we lose her there for a minute?
Oh, I still see her.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no. Hold on. Her camera just went off. Her mic's still on, though.
So we're having a little bit of technical difficulty, sorry. So while she's getting back on here, again, we'll give her a chance once we get her back. Our technical team behind the scenes will work on that. Dan, if you could, real quick, let's get an update on COVID. We usually do that at the top of the show.
All right, so COVID, man, we still seeing numbers go up. We saw last week, it was 63,000. This week, we up to 65,876 cases. We had a increase of 2,867 cases in the last week. But fortunately, the death toll was not as significant. Last week's death toll was 5,907. This week it was 5,972, and that was 65 confirmed deaths in the state of Michigan. Now there's still 65 people gone, and condolences to all of those families that lost somebody to COVID-19. but that is significantly lower than what we were seeing in the last few months. So we're seeing more people get it, but less people dying from it right now.
Right. So as I always say with those, and thank you for those updates. As I always say, look, this thing is not over. Please, folks, continue to be diligent about wearing the mask. Continue to, try to do the distancing. If you can, I know it's tough because the weather's nice and we got some cabin fever. But if at all possible, please make sure that you try to maintain the social distancing and things so that we can get through this, because it's most definitely tough. I'm sorry. Here, let me reach out to our guest.
She back.
Okay, great.
She back.
I'm sorry, my screen just like blacked out
It
and
happens.
I don't know what happened.
Thanks for coming back. But real quick, let me just finish up my statement and we'll
Okay.
give you a chance. Thank you for bearing with us and jumping back on there. But as I was saying, I just really think we need to continue to stay safe, social distant. If you don't need to go there, don't do it. Wash your hands, the things you already know. But let's just stay focused on treating this the same way we did back in March when we were, really concerned about what was next. Continue to have that same concern, because it may not be you that you have to really necessarily worry about, but think about the people that you come in contact with. You're talking about, you and your buddy or your friend who kick it, y'all are going to be fine. But if you are carrying it, even though you don't have symptoms, and you pass it on to your friend who also doesn't have symptoms, and your friend passes it on to Nana, or your friend passes it on to her little brother that's got respiratory concerns. We don't want to spread this around. So continue to be safe out there, everyone. I'm not going to get on my soapbox just yet, although it is our day for that. We got the lovely Lola was able to get back on. For those of you that were at the start here with us, Lola was getting ready to tell us a little bit about herself and her product and things of that nature. So go ahead and tell us who you are, Lolo.
Hey everybody, so my name is Lolo, real name is Lauren for everybody who don't know my real name. I model, and what else do? I do a lot of stuff. I'm actually very hands-on. I like to stay busy, so I model. I have my own business called Lolo Cosmetics. I'm starting to get into the bar scene, so like becoming a bottle girl and stuff like that, and just getting more exposure. So yeah, I'm pretty out there.
So if you don't mind me asking just a couple of questions, I know you wasn't prepared for an interview, but that's what we do here. So you say you have you're modeling, and you also have a cosmetic line. So back to the modeling. Tell me, when did you come to the? I shouldn't say come to, but when did the idea get in your head that modeling was something you was interested in?
Well, for a long time, everybody told me that I should model because of my height.
Okay,
but,
how tall are you?
Well, I thought I was 5'9", but apparently I may be taller than that, maybe 5'10".
Well,
5'11", maybe.
Okay, huh? So we'll go in the middle between 5'9" and 5'11", and we'll say 5'10".
Yeah, we'll say 5'10". I'm pretty tall.
Okay, so yeah, because of the height, people always talked about modeling. Okay.
Yeah, and my first show was actually Kiara's, my god sister. Okay. She was a part of a fashion show, and she was telling everybody about her god sister and how cute I was and tall. So I did it. It was a lingerie fashion show, and I just kind of went from there. Fashion show started to turned into photo shoots, and went from there. It's been 3 years.
Awesome. Well, I've seen some of your work, and shout out to you. So one more question on the modeling, then we'll give you a chance to talk about your cosmetic line. The young women out there that are interested in modeling, if there's any advice you would give to them, I know you said you've been doing it for 3 years. I'm sure that seems like a lifetime, but if you could just give any advice to young women out there that's interested in doing this, you got any advice you could give them out there?
Yes, stay consistent, and you have to stay consistent. That's one thing that I wasn't really consistent as I should have been, because if I was more consistent, I probably would be signed by now, but I wasn't consistent. And just start off doing photo shoots. You don't have to, have to look for an agency, or you don't have to be signed to a company. You could be a freelance model. You could be your own boss. You don't have to have, it's good to have a manager and stuff like that, but just start off with doing photo shoots, and looking up the type of modeling that you want to do. It's different type of modeling, runway, print, commercial, nude. It's a lot. It's more plus size. It's just more modeling out there that people don't know. They think you have to be skinny and tall, and have to be a certain height or a certain weight. No, you can Instagram and have an Instagram. Please have an Instagram.
Okay. Cool. So love that. Thanks for that, sharing that with us. So for you young ladies out there, and even you young men, I'm sure there's men that are interested in doing modeling. It is a such job, and I hear the pay is not bad. Maybe not as good as the women, but we know men get paid a lot more and plenty other things. We won't get into that. So awesome. So, tell us about also to understand you have a product line. Tell us about that and the web page for that, if you don't mind.
Yes, Lolo's Cosmetics. So I started Lolo's Cosmetics last year. I had a launch party in November. Since then, I am in the middle of revamping, redoing my logo, in the process of, starting off with a new product. And I actually just placed the order today, fully stocked. I will be fully stocked in a few weeks. So my website will be up and running. So stay tuned for that. The website will be www.shoploloscosmetics.com. If you try to go to the website, you won't get through. So
okay. It's in the works.
I will have it once I get closer to the release date. Once I get my product, I will have it to where you can subscribe, and you will get a notification when the website go live, so you can get first dibs.
So we put your Instagram in the comment section, so people that's interested in following you on Instagram or seeing your products on Instagram, they can go to Instagram and see it. And then once the website is launched, they can get to the website from the Instagram page.
Yeah, it won't let me do that on here, so.
Yeah, that's okay. I'll put it on there.
Okay.
My partner here, he's a jack of all trades. He makes things happen for us behind the scenes on the podcast, so thank you for that. But that's great, Lauren. I'm really thankful that you came on and shared that information with us. For people out there, one more time, give them the information on how they can get in touch with you. I'm sorry, even if they want to follow you. So, how can they get in touch with Lolo the Model?
Yep, you can follow me on Instagram at The Real Lolo the Model. Twitter, Lolo the Model, and then my business page, Shop Lolo Cosmetics on Instagram, and my business model page is I am Lolo the Model. Also, for booking information, you can there's a link in my bio, and they'll have all my links there as well. Awesome. And if you interested in modeling, I do consult people with a small fee. Got to get my high can, but I am willing to help anybody who is interested, and I'm not gonna charge you no crazy price either. Like, awesome. I'm not gonna do that, but I'm willing to help anybody who is willing, because I have the people, I have the photographers. I know a lot of people that who is looking for new models.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much for coming on. As I said earlier,
thank you for having me.
Our goal is to, get people out there, whatever your hustle is, whatever your dreams and desires are. If we can help you to do that, if we can get, one more person than you had before you came on here, I feel like that's a win.
Absolutely.
be able to
Absolutely.
share your product. And our goal here is we work together. You know, the reason we have the Athena Foundation is because we truly want to help people, and anything we can do out there in the community to help, that's our goal. So what we're getting ready to do is, for our listeners who know what our show is about, we're getting ready to get into it and talk about some current events. I know Dan has some things on his mind. Lolo, if you're interested in Stan, we, love to hear your input on some things. If not, you just let us know. I know modeling keeps you busy, so let us know if you need to go. But we'd love to have you on, just so our listeners can, maybe they might have a question for you or something. So if you want to hang around, it's totally up to you. We wide
Yeah,
open here.
I actually do have to step away, but I will be in the comment section on the
Awesome.
Facebook Live.
Well,
I
thank you.
will be in there active. So any questions I will be able to answer.
Great. And thank you again for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Thank
All
you.
right. That's Lolo
All
the
right.
Mob, everybody.
See y'all. Bye-bye.
So, cuz,
Right.
that was awesome. Again, we want to shout out people. Get in touch with us. We'll give you an opportunity. This is a real easy platform. There's not a lot of prep behind it. Great opportunity for you to promote whatever it is that you have going on. So,
Tiffany.
man, what you got on your mind today?
I'm talking to Tiffany Sanders with her little lip gloss line. We need to see you.
Okay. Oh, she's out there. Hey.
Yeah, I saw her. But all right. Okay, so this week we'll get to her next week. But this week, there was a couple of things. The first thing we're gonna talk about is this incident in Auburn Hills with the lady
Lake
pulling
Orion?
up. Is that where it was? I thought it was
Auburn
Auburn
Hills said, "Don't put that on us."
Oh, they said it wasn't. Okay. So this lady apparently bumped into a teenager and didn't say excuse me at all. So the little girl, I guess teenager, was upset about how the lady was treating her, and then she told her excuse you when she bumped her, and then she said the lady was rude to her, and then the cameras come on, so we catch this incident after the bump and then after the initial confrontation, and then we see the mother and the girl yelling at this lady, and this lady was being real calm, and then from that point it progressed from there. So I want everybody to watch it if you haven't saw it. I'm gonna share my screen so everybody can see it.
We're ready.
Violate a 15-year-old.
Let me pause it right quick. So let me do this. All right.
Violate a 15-year-old.
No, I'm asking a question. She's a child.
She bumped into me when
So if she did something wrong, she needs to apologize. If she did
This
something
ignorant
wrong,
woman
If
bumped
she
into a
apologized,
15-year-old,
correct?
and you're on camera.
Okay.
You're feeling threatened.
Okay, well, go in.
No, Mom.
I got this.
You're blocking me from getting. No, we weren't. No, we weren't. No, we weren't. You're ignorant. She's ignorant.
Do it. I want you to do something.
She's very ignorant.
Dumbass bitch. Yeah, I said it. You say something, I'll beat your white ass. Do something. Please put your
something.
hands.
Do something.
Please.
Who the fuck do you think you guys
Who
are?
do you
Who
think
do
you are?
what think you are?
You told her name, she did nothing.
Yeah,
I didn't. I didn't. No, you didn't. You're very racist and ignorant.
Racist because you're calling
No,
me
you bumped it. She bumped into me.
You cannot just walk around calling white people racist. This is not that type of world. White people are racist. Why would you bump her? No one. Why would you bump her? I care about you. I care about you. And I'm sorry if you. Why did you say sorry? If you bumped into her, why did you say sorry? No one is racist. If you didn't. I'm sorry if you had some like that.
Ignorant. Very, Mom, watch. Wait, you don't get on her face. You gotta get on my face. Right now. Get away. Get the fuck away. Get away. Get the fuck away. You gonna shoot me? Get the fuck away. Oh. Get away. Call them. Call the cops. Get the fuck away. Call the cops. Get away. Call them now. The car. Call them. I'm telling. Call the cops. Get the license plate. Get the license plate now. You would never about to hit me with the damn car. No. With the car? Call Richard back up in the police. Call Richard back up here now. I got it. Don't you fucking jump behind my car. I ain't jumping on your car. Don't you fucking jump. Mom, don't open the fuck back. Get the fuck back. Back the fuck up. You got this on video? Yes. No. Mom, stop walking. Hello? They pulled the gun out on her. These white people, they're so racist. They pulled a gun out on my mama, both of them. It was a white lady and a white man.
All right. Let me, hold on a second. All right.
All right, wow. So that video most definitely had a lot going on in there. Tell me your thoughts on it.
First of all, it's a lot to unpack with that little situation. First of all, if you bump somebody, you probably should say, "Excuse me." I think that's the polite thing to do, and I think the number one lesson we can all learn from is to be kind to one another. So I think, a simple "excuse me" or "I'm sorry" could have killed all of that from happening. I think I don't know what the lady was doing prior, but once they started recording, she was not irate at all. She was never like disrespectful to them at all. And to me, it seemed that they were egging it on, demanding an apology from her, which she just wasn't really willing to give. Like she, I guess, felt like she didn't do anything wrong. If she bumped into the girl, so be it. I don't know. But from what I saw, it to me seemed like that she didn't. She had no intention on apologizing, and the lady and her daughter were kind of being consistent about demanding that apology, and then calling her racist for not making that apology. And then I think we got to think about the situation and the current circumstances we dealing with in this country, where every time a white woman does something, they want to label her as Karen. They want to make her out to be Karen. And I think that lady may have had that on her mind when they had those cameras in her face, which may have made her really reserved.
She when she was in the car still, she made a comment that she is not against her and she understands her plight or something along those lines. Right. Sorry to interrupt.
She told her that I care about you, and I'm sorry that you had an incident that made you think everybody's racist. I've seen some people take that as not a, some people felt like that wasn't an apology. It was kind of sarcastic in nature, where I see some people coming from saying that. And then others felt like it was an apology. So I think that kind of boils down to the person that was receiving that information. Only the lady who received that information can properly say if she took it one way or another. And obviously the lady who know what she meant by it when she said it. So we got E-Mac coming in. Let me bring him in real quick.
Okay.
What's going on? I can't hear you yet. Turn on your audio.
So while he's doing that, we
There we
actually
go.
have another
Okay.
guest joining us today.
Right. So basically, if you missed it, man, we was just talking about the situation here in Michigan where a mother and a daughter, the lady's daughter get into it with a shopper, and the lady bumped the teenager. Teenager demands an apology. The lady doesn't give it. They get into a verbal altercation, and then there's a black lady and her daughter and a white lady and her husband. The white
Okay.
lady ultimately pulls a weapon out on the black family. But there was no threat. And that's my point to the whole thing when I originally saw it. Being scared is not a threat. There has to be a credible threat for you to pull a weapon out on somebody. And your fear of an ass whooping is really not a threat, even if that's what you thought was happening. I mean, throughout life, you know, each of us, you know, may have had an ass whooping throughout our life. So you can't be scared of a fight. So much so where you want to pull out a weapon and defend yourself. That's a problem. You shouldn't have a weapon if that's what you're being taught. I saw her with a good grip on a gun. I appreciated that. I saw her finger straighten off the trigger. That was good. But the reason why she pulled that weapon out, I think, was completely wrong. And anybody that has a concealed weapon permit, especially in the state of Michigan or anywhere else, you can't pull a weapon out because you think you might get beat up. That's just not how it works. So that was pretty much my take on it. I felt like both parties were wrong. I thought the lady, the black family was kind of egging it on a little more than they should. And then I thought, you know, the guy backing up, I'm pretty sure he knew that lady was backing. And, you know, he escalated the situation
Go back in the
top
room.
of them jumping out the car and pulling guns out, which escalated it even further. It could have
Yes,
went
baby, I got
worse than it did. So that's kind of my take on what happened. I thought the family unnecessarily kind of escalated it further than it should have went, because sometimes, you know, some situations you have to walk away from. I mean, they don't know she got a gun, but I mean, you're demanding an apology from somebody longer than I think it should have happened, but that's just me.
Right. So just to recap there, and I agree with you. Typically, we tend to agree. We got to get some people on here that don't think like us. Two things you pointed out, and actually point out quite a few. So thank you for that input there. I think the initial reason this altercation started was because of someone being rude and bumping into you. I agree 100%. I feel like the lady and her daughter, who were the victims of what they considered to be racism, we know there's a ton of racism going on out here. But I can honestly tell you that I don't think that the initial start of this, you know, they may have felt like it was racially ensued, but I feel like that was just somebody that's rude. You know, people rude, and you know, I don't think people discriminate in their rudeness. We can be someplace where it's all likely like people. Just it was a rude act, most definitely. But again, it's almost like in the movie, the Spike Lee movie, when my man was demanding that he apologize for stepping on his Jordans.
Right.
It wasn't going to change anything. You know, that lady apologizing, I feel like she did the right thing and got in her car and attempted to leave. I feel like it most definitely was being egged on. But when we fast forward, and what we specialize in as Athena Protection is when and when not to brandish a firearm. And that was not a situation, because you didn't see it in the video. Not only did the woman in the video show a weapon, her husband was in the vehicle and also showed a weapon, which fast forward to what has already happened. Both of them have been identified and been charged with multiple charges. And to date, the husband has lost his job due to his actions on that video. So just make sure people understand me and clear. You and I agree that, you know, there was wrongdoing on both sides. But from a professional standpoint, our job is to point out and educate on when you're in a situation that you should be pulling a firearm. And that was not that situation. And I think that's why charges was brought on.
Right.
You cannot just pull out your firearm to threaten someone. And that's exactly what that was about. I feel like their life, or they weren't in jeopardy because they were in their vehicle in the process of leaving. Now, the husband, I think he was being a little bit of a tool when he backed up at the point he backed up, because he may have been concerned about them getting his license plate number.
Right.
Which, at that point, I don't know why you were concerned about that. But we do have another person that has shown up. That's our point on that. You know, people, if you want to comment in there, we most definitely can get back to you. But then we have another guest on today.
That's
You
right,
can
man. Go
give
ahead and
opportunity to introduce our guest and tell us why he's on here this afternoon. Thank you for joining us.
Not a problem, man. I appreciate you know, can y'all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Appreciate being invited to the festivities here. I need to get myself caught up with more like the details of the story, and like, you know, because I heard it in passing through like family, of course. Auntie Cheryl was talking to me about it so I heard it like a lot in passing. So I want to get like the ins and outs of everything. But from what's been described so far, man, we have a lot of situations where there's people trying to take advantage of that, you know, same law that these people were unrightfully, from what I'm hearing, trying to flex. And the black people egging it on is going to make it really difficult for us moving forward to try to prove that, you know, people are unrightfully using these laws when you're antagonizing these people. They have you on video antagonizing the situation and putting it, you know, it's one of those situations to where even if you do something wrong, if another person started the situation, then they will be the one to blame for the outcome. So it's kind of like one of those situations to where even if the other person is doing something wrong, because you were the antagonizer, because you started the situation, they could potentially still lead everything and point everything back to the person who instigated the situation as far as legality. So yeah, I definitely agree with y'all on both sides of that. They handled themselves unwrongfully from what you guys described, and it shouldn't have been no antagonizing from the, you know, the black family. We need to make sure we are representing and pointing out real racism, and not just when you've been personally assaulted or when you've been personally disrespected. That's exactly what it seemed like y'all describing. They felt personally disrespected, so they turned it into a racial, everybody get behind me and prove that I'm right type thing, when it should have just been accept when you're wrong.
So that's what it was. But the reason I had you come on is two reasons. You did two things this past week I wanted you to discuss. And one was that long video you put up on IG that I think that might have been a couple of weeks ago. But also you put up the lady in dress that I saw this morning. So before we jump to that, I want to talk about something else gun related, which happened in downtown Detroit in front of the Renaissance. And it was two cyclists got into it with a motorist. And the motorist got out of the car with a knife, and a lady who had a CPL shot and killed him. Now that's a completely different story, but that is a situation where you are well within your rights to use deadly force when somebody is going after somebody that's with you, or you don't have to know them. If you see somebody having potential deadly force used against them, as somebody going at them with a knife, you can use your weapon to defend that person. And that's something that happened downtown. And that is a situation where it's not just fear. There's a credible threat in the vicinity of what's going on and why she pulled her weapon and why she ultimately used her weapon, which I think is an important scenario for us to also take a look at as far as guns are concerned and people using the handguns properly.
If I could just
Exactly.
interrupt real quick here before you respond to that. Darren, if you could let our listeners know who our guest is and introduce him. Thank you again for being on the show.
Well, this is a relative, and he goes by the name of E-Maculent MC, and he always deep into politics, deep into race relations and things like that. So I wanted to give him a chance to speak on about his views and how he felt about what was going on. But let everybody know a little bit about yourself real quick.
Immaculate MC. That's what's up.
Yeah,
Okay.
I appreciate it. Can y'all still hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, yeah. Sorry about that. Let me introduce myself. Born and raised from the D, Immaculate MC. I'm one of the West Coast connections out here to my Detroit family, and like you said, man, I'm a lyricist. I'm true to the cause of like the progress of our people, of the Black cause, but I'm also about knowledge and action. You know, we have to be intellectual. We have to be understanding as far as the direction that we move in with our actions. It can't just be actions simply because of action. So,
Great point.
As he stated, I try to be on the side of justice. I try to be on the side of righteousness and of unity amongst Black people and all people as far as moving the cause of Black people along, you know.
Great. And if you could respond, Dan was inquiring about the video that you posted. If you can give us a little more insight on that video.
Okay, for sure. So yeah, it was just a quick 4-minute video where it was a whole lot going on in my heart about George Floyd. You know, what is crazy is I'm not sure where I got it from. It was from one of these stores around here, but a week before the George Floyd situation, I had a fake $5 bill in my pocket. So George Floyd's situation hit me so hard, it was difficult for me to muster the words to try to like properly, you know, let people know what I felt, because as we all felt, some people just felt like we were watching ourselves, we were watching our sons, brothers, uncles, so on and so forth. So I left the video, and I originally made it around the time Colin Kaepernick's situation took place. And it was just addressing, first off, misconceptions about, you know, a person's perception on kneeling for the flag, where as far as it's in reverence to the lives that's lost and not a disrespect, not an affront to the flag, just a need to highlight the people that we've lost along the way. And, you know, we need to be incorporated. But then also that we are not talking to just average, everyday American Caucasian citizens. When we speak on things like justice and legislation, reparations, things of that nature, we are addressing the same institution that was in place in 1865, which is this American government. So it shouldn't be a reason for people to, you know, spend so much time arguing, going back and forth, attacking regular American citizens, unless it's Donald Trump or somebody actually in position to, you know, move legislation and get us, you know, progress as far as how we need it as a people.
I agree wholeheartedly with you on that. That's a great point. If I could just summarize on what you've spoken of so far, and thank you again. People, we have to understand, you know, every little situation is not worthy of pulling the phone out and trying to go viral. That mother and her daughter, I'm gonna be honest, I feel like they pushed the situation, and when it got real, you know, we don't need anybody out there putting themselves in a situation where they can be shot on video. Don't go out there. George Floyd didn't go out there and come into a situation and say, hey, I want to go viral. It's not about that. You know, the mother and the daughter had an opportunity to pull out their cell phones, or whoever had the cell phone, and record and continue to demand a apology. And as we, you know, we won't go back over it, but let's just, like you said, let's be intelligent on what it is we're trying to accomplish here. You know, people are, you know, talking about the racism, and we know that some of these things are not some. We know that most of them are factual, but within that, I feel like we also need to be realistic and be able to articulate ourselves and show our level of intelligence, because at the end of the day, our goal is not that we want more than what somebody else have. We want equal. We want to be treated the same way, and that's the frustration. And I think that's why we see a lot of the fear, is because you got our current climate. you got people who, yes, they identify with the fact that some things are wrong out here, and they know that it's not equal, because you did a poll and said who want to be a black man in America. Anybody other than a black man in America, that's not going to be a long line of people raising their hands to stand over there and do that. So we know that there is an issue there, but we have to just be intelligent in what it is we're trying to accomplish. Now, by any means, I am not saying that we're going to continue to turn the other cheek like we've done in the past. We're not gonna provoke anything, but we damn sure not gonna back down from anything, and that needs to be the message. And I think we all on the same page there. So appreciate that. Dan, any other thoughts on that, or what else did you want to get into right here? We all here on the same page on that one.
Another thing he posted was a lady in dress. I'm gonna share the picture with everybody in the comments. Hopefully.
Okay.
So
You saying dress or a dress? Well, if it was a lady, I guess. Okay. Because I don't see nothing wrong with a lady in a dress.
No.
Especially a sundress. Okay, stop it. Anyway.
We and I had a whole conversation with a group of, my friends around here about this. So that's the reason why I wanted to post it, just to put it out there. So it's a lot of different feelings as far as with the racial tension. So it's bringing up a lot of mixed emotions and conversations about like cultural appropriation, which I can definitely understand the importance of, especially with how we didn't, and I put emphasis on didn't, have as much control over the narrative of our culture over the years in the 80s and 90s. We have a lot, as far as the youngsters, they have a lot more control over that narrative now. They have their own personal platforms. They have YouTube, they have, SoundCloud. They actually have a way to go direct to consumers. So you have people of the J. Cole quality, of the Kendrick quality, who can actually prosper now because we don't have to wait on the radio shows, MTVs, so on and so forth. So, but I'm waiting for Dan to put the picture up there. My main point with it is, as far as with cultural appropriation, hip hop is the most unifying culture to ever exist. I always said that. A lot of people are embracing the fact now, but with that being the fact, then you can't be mad that there's 19-year-old white people born and raised in hip hop. So when they talk to you, the language is identifiable, but now we're feeling some type of way because of the culture, because of the environment. Everybody like, oh, that's cultural appropriation. Well, it's a specific definition. If he waited till he was 16 to start talking like that, I agree for sure. But if he's been talking like this since birth, then, and then one of the main comments that one of my friends made was like, well, I just feel uncomfortable. You can be a part of hip hop, but you don't have to talk black. I have a lot of, people who embrace hip hop and listen to hip hop music, but they don't talk black. And I was like, well, let's explore that a little more. You saying talk black as if there's a specific sound to talking black. So what you're saying is, if I didn't talk like you, then I would be culturally appropriating because I listen. So you see, so that was my whole issue. Like you telling a person that if they speak a different way, then they are not a part of that culture, and that that's not the way it goes. It's only because of the hypersensitivity that we have now that cultural appropriation is so deeply embedded. And the main thing that started the conversation was an artist, Logic. I don't know if y'all heard of that artist, Logic.
Yep.
He's half black and half white, but their whole perspective was he's a white guy doing black music. I don't like him. I this rubs me the wrong way, and I had to reiterate so that it makes me feel like if my daughter grew up and wanted to do music one day, she's going to encounter that same situation, even though her family, she, regardless of what she's mixed with, she is black for sure.
Right. And again, the point that you made earlier about us, knowing who our true battle is with when it comes to this systemic racism, Yeah, you might have that racist neighbor down the street or whatever who you may or may not change, but our goal is on a bigger level.
Second. Sorry about that.
Sure, no problem. Our goal on a bigger level is we want to get that change.
I hope not.
Within big politics, we want it within the police department. We want it, in our day-to-day lives. While you're standing in line at the grocery store, you might not get it. When you're driving on the road and people are not letting you in, It may or may not be racism, but it's just, damn it, I'm tired of being in this traffic just like you are, and I'm not letting you in. Asshole, yes. Racism may or may not necessarily be the reasoning behind that. Some people are assholes, and they're just assholes because they're assholes. But I just don't like us putting ourselves in situations trying to prove a point, because I feel like we are putting ourselves as a whole. And just to catch you back up, I'm talking about how we're trying to get these responses from people on video, how in turn I feel like, because right, wrong, and indifferent, we don't want to put ourselves in a situation where our safety is in jeopardy. That woman and her daughter, hate to keep bringing it up, but they weren't in a situation where if that got physical that they could defend themselves. They wanted to prove a point and put their safety in jeopardy. So we don't want to do that when we're out here. But back to what, the comment that you made on it. Dan, did you have any input on that?
I did not, but I'm gonna share my screen for a second so y'all can see who he was talking about.
Okay, great.
All right, this is the lady here that we were talking about.
So that's an obvious white woman with dreads in her hair. They get
And
that
then,
in Jamaica every vacation.
Exactly. Now, the whole point of the post was just, explaining the difference between actual cultural appropriation versus somebody born and raised in the culture and people having. And then I had to highlight that I do acknowledge that within the industry, there is institutional racism that allows, certain white representation of hip hop culture to prosper more than black representation. That's definitely acknowledged, but that's the institution, exactly what we should be attacking right now. That's the institutional racism and not the individual. Right. And what people wouldn't know about this person. There's a lot of people within America like, oh, I'm so upset. I don't like she got dreads, but she's born and raised in Jamaica. So, that's like, how can it be cultural appropriation when that is the culture she's born and raised in?
Right.
It's kind of like Eminem growing up on 8 Mile in the trailer park. People don't like Eminem just for the simple fact that they're a white guy and they think he, tried to take something from us. That's just, his relationship with Proof and the rest of those guys from D12, that was a genuine relationship they had. They all was poor. They all was in the struggle. For him to be a white guy, he wasn't prospering from it in no way, shape, or form. And I know the movie is loosely based on, Eminem's life, but just in general, that's another example of, I wouldn't look at that as appropriate, someone taking advantage of a system. And, people may feel differently about it, but great point. I know I've been to Jamaica, and I know they put those braids, and anybody with enough hair, white, black, it don't matter. If you sit still long enough, they'll braid them bad boys in your head.
And I also made the comment that, me being from Detroit, I've never, even though I grew up around gangster sort of antics and transactions, never considered myself a gangster, wanted to be the complete opposite. But because I know what it looks like, trust me, it's a lot of black people when they get these record deals, cultural appropriating about how much they shoot their gun and how gangster. I'm like, man, so that happens too, but that's just a side.
That's a great point you bring up, because and we love our students that come through our training. We've had many men come through our training boasting about how they pop off, and we get them in there and they can't hit the side of a bump.
Exactly.
The great thing is, by the time they leave, they can, but we know that people talk a good game sometimes. So some great points. I agree with you wholeheartedly there. What else we got on the docket today? That's most definitely some interesting points of view there.
So today, other than that, we seeing a lot of Confederate statues go down, and we, how people feel about the Confederate flag, and they call it a symbol of history. But most of those Confederate statues went up, in the 40s, or after long after. The Confederate failed. So I think in this country, we shouldn't be honoring anybody that succeeded from the Union and went to war with the United States of America and lost. Like I just don't understand, the love for a losing side like that, and then try to call it pride. Being a traitor isn't something to be prideful about, in my opinion.
And I got,
But
if I could just jump in for a second, I'm so confused, and if one of our listeners can help me understand. So we had the Confederates that, as you just mentioned, went against the country, correct?
yeah,
And the big part of the fight, if I'm correct, was their right to continue in slavery and own slaves.
right.
Big part of it. They wanted their independence, but within that, they wanted to have the right to be able to maintain and control slavery. And the rest of the country was saying no and lost, as we know. So it's almost like, to me, somebody wanted to promote NBA finals after they lost and wanted to sell their championship product. We know that there's a ton of kids probably over in India somewhere or some faraway country wearing the 2016 Golden State Warriors championship cap. And we know that's not what happened in 2016. But my point being this, the Confederate flag is something that is a representation of a stance that was a failure. And never mind what the stance was about, but the fact you lost and you still are trying to earn it at, I'm confused because the representation is supposed to be honoring the flag and what it was meant for, but in the same breath, losing and wanting to have the values that you have towards that flag. But those same people, and I'm safe in saying this, probably high 90, 98+% of those people are the same ones who feel like NFL football players kneeling against the United States flag and or the anthem are not considered to be American, but you same people want to carry a flag that says F America and think that it's okay. Am I on, are you feeling me here? I feel like I'm on the block. I don't know if I'm at the right house yet, but I'm just confused there. Maybe is that making sense to anybody out there listening?
I don't think there's nothing to be confused about. I mean, that's what the flag represents. It represents a portion of the country that wanted to maintain slavery and that went to war against the United States. I mean, it's kind of simple. And the reemergence of that flag kind of happened in the name of racism more than in the name of Southern pride or anything like that. So for it to be, those monuments to be taken down, I think, it's a step forward, in my opinion. And, a lot of people are pissed off about it, and a lot of people feel like, we should maintain it. If they want to maintain a Confederate flag, they can put it in the Smithsonian. They can put it, in the museums of Washington, D.C. to preserve and to discuss and teach the history of this country and how it took place. You can go to a museum and see it if you want to see it. But for it to stand as state flags and stand in front of state capitals and, people waving it everywhere at protests and things like that, I just think it's the wrong idea.
And as you know, Guzzo, as you know, Guzzo, I'm out here in Arizona right now. So it's like my son just hit me to the fact that he's noticing a lot of people. We always notice it, but it's usually in people's, windows. Now it's on people's cars. Now they're trying to flaunt it a little more and bring it more to the forefront. And what, kind of crossed my mind the other day is like, it's not like you guys can't understand what we mean by the negativity connected to that, because you can see that in how many Martin Luther King Boulevard streets it is versus Malcolm X. A lot less Malcolm X Boulevard streets, you know what I'm saying? Because Martin Luther King had that. And I don't know of any Huey P. Newton Boulevards. Do you guys? I mean, I could be mistaken. I know of some J. Edgar Hoover Boulevards still to this day. And and he was a murderer.
Right.
And I think part of it is, as we had opportunities to better educate ourselves, because a lot of these things we know and we talked about this on previous podcasts, is we know that the education of these type of topics most definitely doesn't happen within the school system. And unfortunately, for a ton of our, other races out there to go through the schooling system that we all know is geared for them to be successful and whatnot, they don't understand or have any type of understanding whatsoever of who we are and what we've been through because they're not educated on it. It's almost, like the lack of education that, you talking about what you're seeing in Arizona versus, which Arizona, I'm sure for anybody, our listeners out there noted, it's probably going to be a huge Spanish community out there. But it's probably not the biggest of a Black community. If I had to guesstimate, I've rolled through there, haven't spent a lot of time, but I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that, it's not a huge Black population out there in Arizona. When you think of places like Atlanta and i.e. here in the Detroit, where we're from, we tend to have a much larger population within the metropolitan, that is. We know we have parts of Michigan we could go and you wouldn't think that there is a such thing as Black people. But it's just interesting to hear that out in Arizona, and you're in the Phoenix area?
Yep, exactly.
So in the Phoenix area, if I'm understanding you correct, you as well as your son have noticed a huge uptick in, people being outwardly, showing their approval and their allegiance to that flag. And,
Exactly.
For us, it has so much hatred and so much behind it. I feel like, and you can correct me if wrong, I feel like people are using that as a F you, we don't care. Is that the same thing that you feeling out there when you
100.
see that? And is that how you feel like it's being portrayed? Because here is only the guys with the big pickup trucks with the, the super monster wheels on it. They don't have shirts with sleeves on it. And I know I'm being silly when I sarcastically, try to categorize the people to do this, but they tend to, be an exact particular type of person. Is that what you're saying out there, or is it just blatant everywhere?
I will say this: it can be blatant, but the issue out here is exactly the opposite of what you represented there. Because of course, in Detroit, they definitely stand out, and you have those out here as well. But then you have those because, as we all know, Arizona was one of the last states to recognize Martin Luther King birthday as a holiday, and you still have jobs who won't recognize it at all. So there's a lot of institutional. Yeah, there's a lot of institutional racism in Arizona, and it's like so embedded. People who know that it's going to be mandatory, they work with other races. They've learned to do the song and dance. They've learned to embrace some of our music. They learn to embrace some of our, antics as far as partying and good time. They might even go to a bar or two with a Black person, Latino person. But I know because of how I was raised and because of what I've known to pay attention to when the dog whistles and little signs and noticing that little Confederate sticker on the inside of your car and little stuff because you don't want to. So it's a lot of people who interact on a daily basis, suit and tie, maybe even a little, Chuck Taylors and a regular hip hop look. But they super Trump supporters and they super, that racism has been handed down through generation. That's how they got their money. And they knew they wasn't going to get that, trust fund unless they stuck to the plan.
That's interesting.
And you feel that within like small businesses out here. You feel that within, auto zones and tire shops, Denny's, Fry's, Walmart. So depending on what city you might be in, if you in, some of the Scottsdale, Chandler type areas, you would definitely feel it a lot more.
Hey,
I had an NBA player tell
change
me
the subject because I'm a foodie. Now I recognized the AutoZone and a couple of those, but you said something about Fry's. What's that? Tell us what Fry's is.
Fry's is actually another grocery store, so it's like a grocery store chain out here. It's almost like Kroger, something like that. And certain Fry, they have Fry's over there in West Phoenix, South Phoenix, which is like where we tend to be at, and then they have Fry's over there on the north side in Scottsdale, and it's a totally different experience for sure.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah.
I love to get that perspective, and I like to travel. As many of my friends and family know, I like to collect shot glasses from all over the world.
Okay.
And I've been through Arizona.
It's a lot of people from Detroit moving out here.
Well, you know, I sure I wouldn't be saying nothing slick to a can of oil, but you know, we went out there, you know, back in the late '80s, going to the '90s. You know, we had connects out there for numerous reasons. So I know that's how a lot of us, you know, did dealers in there.
Exactly, and that's why we came flooding through.
Right. So, but I know on a serious tip, I know that the environment out there, the climate is very conducive to helping people with respiratory problems because of the air out there. So again, another reason that I know a lot of people have migrated to that area, and spend a lot of time on. When I go west, it's typically to Vegas, but that dry heat, man, most definitely is not something to mess with. It's different, you know. It's not the humidity like we get here in the Midwest and you know down south, but most definitely can get hot out there. So it's always good to, you know, talk to somebody from on the West Coast. And again, we love having you on. Dan, give you opportunity to jump in here. What else did you have on your mind this afternoon?
So that was pretty much all I had, man. I just wanted to kind of discuss what we saw, you know, with the gun ownership this week with some of the CPL holders, the lady mismanaging, making the wrong decision to pull her weapon out during the time where she shouldn't. Then there was another situation where a lady did. She unfortunately had to take somebody's life that was threatening the life of somebody she was with. And there was another situation that took place in Detroit where he actually wasn't, I don't think he was a CPL holder. He was open carrying, a security guard, was open carrying a weapon. And his shirt was partially covering the gun, and the police stopped him and arrested him for carrying a concealed weapon, but because of the partial cover. And then they said that their hands were tied because of the law. Like they had no choice but to take him in. So now this guy that works as a security guard, who had the gun, was actually registered to him. It was his, and he was out open carrying, and his shirt partially covered the weapon, and they decided to use that to stop him and lock him up for carrying a concealed weapon. So those of you that are out there that are open carrying in Michigan, which is something you can do, that gun has to be completely open. No part of your clothing can be over it, even the slightest cover. I know it's semantics, but you can go to jail for carrying a concealed weapon if you are not careful. So this guy had on a big shirt, and it flopped over it and ended up covering a part of the gun.
So just to make sure I understand this correctly, and this is for our listeners out there, great points you bring up, and I also want to talk about some other things when it comes to open carrying, because we are here in Michigan and we do have the opportunity to open carry. So what Dan is talking about is gentleman open carries. He puts his weapon on and puts it on. You know, they have a what they call outside holster versus inside. Gentleman was carrying his weapon on the outside, but because he had on a shirt that at some point covered up that weapon, and we call that concealed. So what Dan is talking about there, and I like to add on to it, is you have to understand that open carry here in Michigan, especially with the climate that we're in, because people feel like they need to show that they're willing to protect themselves. You know, I can agree or disagree with that. But the point being is understanding open carry here in Michigan, because as Dan said, you can open carry here in Michigan, meaning that all you have to do is have to be the right age and pass the background check, and you can purchase a firearm, be it a long rifle, shotgun, or handgun, and you can carry any of those items as long as they're fully visible when you're out in public. And I just like to point out something, and we talk about this in our class, and we get a little more in detail in it. So if you want to take our class, we're going to be offering it online and some things of that nature. I'll get into that in a moment. But it's important that you understand some things that you really don't think about when it comes to, you think you're within your rights here in Michigan with the open carry, is as soon as you get into your vehicle, even though that weapon, you may have your wife beater tucked in to your shorts with your open carry gun, but once you get into a vehicle with that weapon on your hip, now it is concealed because you're inside of the vehicle. And on our very, very first podcast, for those of you who've been hanging in there with us, we talked about this. And in some cities, and this is a big debate that Dan even went into with another retired officer, it's illegal to get onto a bicycle or even a motorized motorcycle, scooter, and things of that nature. Is considered concealed, even though it's out and you're on those things. And Dan, if you could just kind of give your perspective on that, if you remember that conversation.
I still disagree
on that.
I still disagree with the bike thing. If it's open, it's open. So, I mean, I get it with the car. The car doors conceal weapons. You can't see it from the street. But if you're on a bicycle, I haven't saw that in writing yet. He didn't produce it. So, in my opinion, I'm still right until he proved me otherwise.
So, but you do have officers out there that will utilize, and my point in this is always educating our public out there. My point is, there are some officers that will try to, as we like to say, jam you up with that. If you've got a good lawyer, yes, you may be able to beat it, but just know that you got to consider all of these things if you're going to open carry here in the state of Michigan. So great point.
Cost, and you asking to be investigated. Like some officer, 9 times out of 10, like 10 may pass you by, but there may be one that will stop you and investigate you to make sure that weapon is registered and make sure that you want to up and up with it. Which is, what they should be doing. Because like we hear about this defund the police thing a lot, and, police are saying that, it's 50 shootings over the weekend. You're going to defund the police. You're going to defund the police. Then who's going to help you? Well, if there's a bunch of police officers out there, there shouldn't be 50 shootings over the weekend. I think that's something we should probably talk about and discuss. Like, if there's a bunch of police officers in the area, why in the hell is there 50 shootings? I think police need to kind of look at being a little more proactive than reactive. Police only come and they write the report after you've been shot. How about us not getting shot? Let's kind of go after that kind of approach to make sure
police in our neighborhood
doesn't happen. Police that area, a little more than what's happening. It does us no good to have a bunch of police in a precinct or an area and there's still crimes happening. What the hell are you doing?
Man, that's a great point you bring up there. And just in case somebody missed that, because, sometimes people be listening, but they don't hear us though. Just make sure I understand this correctly. So we do a really good job of reporting that there has been a shooting, and we seen it on Father's Day weekend. We saw it this 4th of July weekend. When I got up this morning, I didn't see a whole bunch of reports about all of the great times that people had, for the 4th of July. I feel like people were saying that, everybody went out and spent their stimulus check at the mall and this, that, the other. Wrong. I disagree. I think everybody spent their stimulus checks at the fireworks store because we didn't have the Detroit fireworks, but damn it, we had the fireworks in the neighborhood. They were setting off stuff that I ain't never heard of. Shook me out of the bed a couple of times. Most definitely, hats off to any veterans and people with pets and, any of those major concerns that come with the fireworks. They went wild this past evening. And that most definitely was, I think, a lot of what was going on. But my point anyway, I'm sorry to get off track there. My point is, we have to really make sure that we understand the media will try to make it seem like the murders is on the people in the communities and they just are horrible, horrible people. You know, I always go back to my AAU experience with my son playing basketball and the coach yelling, you got to make your free throws to a bunch of 9-year-olds. And they're like, we got to make them. But if you don't show them how to put their feet and how to flick their wrists, they won't make the free throw. You know, so don't let the media fake you into thinking that it's the citizens' fault for getting shot and having the crime. It's like you try to paint this picture of these neighborhoods because of this violence that's going on. And we know that this day and age with the technology and the record reporting that you should be able to track and know that your hot areas in your communities if you're policing correctly. So Dan, great point there. I'm sorry for babbling for a minute, but my whole point was we have to make sure that when we're talking about things we demand within politics or within our city council, we have to demand better policing. You know, the police, you know these things are going on, you know these hot spots, go over there and deal with them. You know what, and I hate to bring up and put a particular street on the map, but we know 7 Mile and Gratiot, anybody that grew up in Detroit, whether you east or west, you know that it get kind of interesting over in that area. So why wouldn't we put resources there to make sure that we can combat that? So great point. I agree with you wholeheartedly that we got to stop making it seem like it's the victim's fault and the criminals in that area that aren't being policed. So yes, people are frustrated talking about defunding the police because they feel like you're not doing what you should be doing. And I know there's more to it. I'm not just saying the hell with the police department.
I mean, it ain't
Look at another way of doing the job.
But crime is time and opportunity. We all know that. We all know that it's time and opportunity.
Say that again. So make sure people understand. Crime happens based off of the timing and the opportunity.
Right. Because, you know, the criminals, you know, in some cases, you know, they want to get away. In some cases, you know, some people don't care. So, you know, for the most part, you know, it's time and opportunity. And I think policing needs to be on a proactive scale, more so than just coming to pick up bodies and write reports. You're not helping the situation by doing that.
Talk. I'm glad of both of those points y'all brought up, especially that first one with the open carry, because Arizona is an open carry as well. As y'all stated, it ain't as many of us out here, and then there's a lot more of them up out there. So I'm hoping that, you know, whoever might be within my region absorb everything that y'all was saying with that, because you see the open carry out here, and you definitely see the police super on top of, you know, when anybody of any sort of color outside of white. Because, you know, I know y'all may see on the news here, they actually go at our Latino brothers a lot more than they go after us out here. In this particular Arizona, they have some sort of major specific thing. And of course, they racist on both ends. But so a lot of the community leaders, a lot of the activists who I, you know, connect with is a lot of, you know, the Latino movement, because it's not really a lot of a big presence. And then all of the African-American presence is deep West, deep South. But yeah, there's definitely a big need for people in Arizona to be aware of that whole open carry thing. And then the whole thing which y'all said about the policing is not the community fault. That go back to my whole root cause of the issue conversation that I was having with the whole reparations and with the whole us addressing. If we continue to just shave off the leaves and everybody make a big fuss off the leaves, then we're going to let the roots destroy our soil. So, you know, I hope everybody knows that. And it's about taking steps towards getting to the root, understanding regardless of how complicated it is, just so people know, I don't mean reparations as far as putting a bunch of money in Black people's hands so all the irresponsible people can waste that money for their children. I want it to be a position where we can put businesses back in our communities. We can put banks and grocery stores and hospitals, Black owned, coming from Black, even if it's like multiple people within the Black community come together to actually own, but Black owned, life sustaining businesses instead of just, you know, the little BS that we have. And regardless of how complicated it is, we can start compiling a plan now that actually if we can get somebody to come up with a plan to get a tunnel and get traffic 2 hours between San Francisco and LA, we can get some people to come up with a logical idea of how reparations can work for sure.
Great point. I
You
love
got
it.
a ton of opponents against I just had an argument with a lady this week about reparations, and not that I was even arguing for or against it. She just said something crazy that I just completely disagree with. She said something to the tune of 640,000 Americans and one president dead, your reparations were paid in full. Now, over 600 people died in the Civil War in America, 600,000. And she was referencing the people that died in the Civil War, and Lincoln being killed was paid for reparations. You can't call reparations payment, deaths of people payment for reparations for people who were forced to fight on the side of the Confederacy to maintain their involuntary servitude. That's ridiculous as hell to me. How could you even fix your mouth to say something like that?
I'm gonna help you fight to keep me a slave.
Yeah, that's what some of them had to do. Obviously, and some of them ran away to fight with the Union. And afterwards, we had Reconstruction, which was actually working to a certain degree. And then when they pulled the troops out the South, that's when all hell broke loose. And you saw the white supremacy kind of take over again. And you saw people losing their rights to vote, because it was a lot of Black people voted in the offices. Black people were owning land. Black people had businesses and things of that nature. But once those troops came out the South, you saw less people voting. You saw Black codes going into place where you could get arrested for almost anything and put on the chain gang. And then you saw Jim Crow go into effect, and then people really not having anything. And that's between, the early 1900s all the way into the 60s, where we saw people getting lynched on a regular basis and several race riots happening throughout the United States. So I think people have this ability to just not listen to, what they don't have an understanding that of these generational issues that took place from the time of slavery all the way until today, or why even people are talking about reparations when we were never given that economic opportunity like everybody else or anybody else that was in this country or that came to this country. So that's why people kind of always, you hear reparations popping back up, because Black people brought the wealth to America by that 300 years or so of free labor.
Exactly.
And I know some people want to argue that, I've heard this argument. Well, they had to be fed, they had to be housed, they needed medical attention. That's all bull to me. You know what I'm saying? You can't say that the cost of having a slave is beneficial to the slave. It's not.
They leave when they want it. They couldn't go and do something else. Hell, a lot of cases they were told they couldn't educate themselves, which ironically is the 2 points that I want to bring up. One, when we talk about with the reparations, if money's going to be given out, the lack of education that a lot of the Black communities have on how to go about dealing with businesses. So just the educational system, we talk about it all the time. My point being is, once again, AAU analogy, you can't give me $100,000 and be like, well, I gave you $100,000 and I don't have the education on how and what I should do with it. And I end up just buying Red Lobster and extra cheddar biscuits with it.
And that's what'll happen. You know what I mean? That's what'll happen.
Then we'll say, see, we gave it to you and look what you did with it. Once again, it's the lack of education. And then the flip side to that is also the lack of education on us as a whole to the, not to turn this into another sports analogy, but someone talked about this. I listen to a lot of sports radio, and they talked about teams in the NBA. And for any of us, all of us on the podcast, they look like we all in the somewhat same era age-wise. I'm sure I'm a little bit older than you young whippersnappers. But we talk about something as simple as the mystique behind being a New York Knick and playing in Madison Garden. You know, when I was coming up, that was a big to-do. You know, New York was the mecca of basketball, and that's where it all went down at. And right now, you can't pay somebody in the NBA or even a young kid coming up to be excited about going to New York. And it's been that way for well over 25 plus years. Correct me if I'm wrong. So you take a person that's 20, 30 years old. You think about when you started truly watching sports, whether it was because of your parent or uncle or whoever, and your love for it. It probably started for me being a huge sports fan. I can remember it being between the ages of maybe 6 and 8 to 9 years old is when I truly felt like I became a sports fan and had my favorites and things of that nature. And I bring this up to say that a kid raised, in the last 30 years has no clue as to New York being this mecca without education, because what they see now is not New York basketball being something of importance. And my point being that same thing when it comes to the lack of education for people understanding, people that's growing up right now, if you were a, young teenager or young adult, your late teenage years, you can educate yourself pretty well and understand on a lot of these things. But when we think about people who represent, i.e. the Confederate, and we think about people that, have these, perceptions on what things are, it's based off of their education. Right now, if you were to poll, even out there in Arizona, if you were to poll, most of these people that stand behind that Confederate, and if you could get them to articulate, they would have a hard time doing it, and they would most definitely probably be off on their facts. And I equate that to the same thing that we're dealing with everything else when it comes to people not understanding us because they have a lack of understanding on our history. The football player said, hey, my granddaddy and my great-granddaddy fought in the World War Wars, 1 and 2. Motherfucker, we did too, and guess what? We went over there and fought in other countries for rights for this country and got home and didn't even have rights. So a lack of education from that individual,
people don't
thinking that only his granddaddy and great-granddaddy went and did something for this country.
People don't really want to know.
You
I
had
think
to be
they
educated.
don't care. Yeah, I think even if you try to tell people, we are operating so much and so differently that our perceptions of reality are completely different. So somebody who does not like reparations or don't like the idea of you having reparations, their perception of reality is different. They operate on a different, completely different plane than you. So they're not gonna get what you're saying. So what I don't understand how we can even get close to helping somebody understand, well, you can't really if they're not willing to listen and learn. People that's not willing to listen and learn, they're not gonna understand where you're coming from.
It's like we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, making somebody apologize for being rude.
Right.
Or as I like to always take it to a relationship, you're going to make that ex tell you why they don't want to be with you no more. Yeah, you could try.
Just go.
You could try, and no matter what answer they give you, you're going to debate it. And you're going to, especially if you left there hurt, you're going to debate it on all kind of ends, and you're still not going to be happy.
Yeah, it don't really matter what you hear. You know what I'm saying? The answer ain't never going to be what you want to hear, because they gone. So that's a tough one. You know what I'm saying? Just relationship wise or reality wise. I don't think you can force people when they not trying to listen and learn. That's just not happening. Like, I was going back and forth with this lady about reparations, and she told me I need to forget the past. How can you move forward if you don't forget the past? So, I said, did you forget 9/11?
Exactly.
You post the towers every year, I'm sure. And you remember that. You remember the Boston bombing. You know, you remember, you know, all kind of the Holocaust. We talk about all these things. You don't tell them to
Those
forget.
police officers that got murdered in Dallas. You know, that was recent.
It's
People
disrespectful.
hold on to that.
You know,
For
people
sure.
to forget something that's happened. You know, when you done something wrong in the past to somebody, not that lady personally, but just a group of people or a system that's designed to do something to you. Why would you ever forget it? That doesn't make sense.
Exactly. I 100% agree. They act like we don't supposed to really uphold the lives laws. They act like the point is slavery and not that this was our family. So that's the biggest. I don't even talk to people that's not either black or an ally and who understand, and we try to come in. I've gotten to the point to where I can't even have healthy, comfortable intellectual debates because I can't see how you can be so selectively intelligent, where you got all these degrees and numbers behind what you have, but when it comes to reparations, you can't see how that makes sense when your forefathers wrote it into what they feel needs to be the next steps. After slavery was ended, they said 40 acres and a mule. And that would have been simple. It could have been through land. We could have built our wealth that way. Instead, you've made it this complicated, you know, point to where we're not going to forget about it, but you keep telling us to forget about it, even though you haven't approached reparation for us, but for the natives and for Jewish. You know, the Germans did it for the Jewish people, and the American did it for Japanese Americans after World War II. So it's not like it's something that is unprecedented. It has happened before, and you know the foundation is there. And just to hint on that, it is complicated. I don't want to go too far in my personal ideas as far as reparations, but to hit on your point, Cool, there definitely needs to be a 3-point step as far as foundation land first, as far as laying the foundation for embracing the amount of income that might come our way. Foundation land as far as understanding business, understanding taxes, understanding, you know, inventory, understanding trade, universal, you know, global trade, all of that. Then that second wave is, you know, actually implementing the money. And then you're going to need a third wave to actually support whatever sort of groundwork we would build. And it's going to be within the Black communities instead of just directly in every individual Black person's hands. Black people will have the ability to get, you know, loans towards businesses and things of that nature, but I don't think it'll benefit us long term to just put the money in and say let it be where it may, and let, you know, the responsible people do good and the irresponsible people, it's without a doubt, and they all gonna spend it. Pretty much the irresponsible people are gonna spend it on the same thing versus if you had it accessible, but you had to do you had to take the responsible route in order to access it. Then that would make people's mind get, you know, change up. And
you're talking real responsible, man, and I like that. I like that, but I don't trust that the government would ever do something like that, because we had to file or pass legislation for Black people to be treated somewhat fairly, which is a problem. You should never have to pass legislation for people to be treated fair and equal, and you shouldn't have to pass legislation to try to end segregation. And even when they did that, they couldn't get compliance on it. So passing legislation really don't mean anything if they're not going to make sure that it's being enforced. So even if in the fact that they gave some form of reparations, when are they going to allocate the money? They can always pass it, but when are they going to allocate the money to be distributed?
That's a great point. We definitely need to have like a trusted sort of like, and even then, you know, but we need to have a trusted sort of like Black counsel to oversee that whole process. So once everything takes place, but I will say this, you're right, legislation, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't know if you guys knew about Johnny, you just might have knew about Johnny Cochran's last case before death. He wanted to take America on trial for reparations. I think we're going to have to win it in court. I definitely think I don't think it's going to be something that the country is going to agree on. We can't get any petition signed.
I mean, they ain't did it yet.
Give us our day in court. Period.
They haven't did it yet, so I don't foresee it just being voluntarily passed out of the kindness of their hearts. I don't think so.
Without a doubt, we're gonna have to force the issue to the Supreme Court. That's for sure. The only way I see that. I agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Eric Dyson, where you at? Start that legal team.
Exactly. You know, let's call out some people who we feel most definitely seem to have their finger on the pulse of the community, but like I said, we just have to know that they will do it with the whole ideal of setting us up for failure. Because as Dave Chappelle did,
For
can't
sure.
all go out and buy Cadillacs with it
Mhm.
and crab legs.
Oh, and
And unfortunately for the ones that will and have done those type of things, we can't fault them on it either. Because back to my analogy, AAU baby, we mad at the kids for missing free throws, or we mad at the people who got shot over the weekend, or I won't use the word mad, but we highlight and point those things out, and it's like it's a bigger fish to fry here. I tell all of our listeners to continue to educate yourself, and something that it seems so simple and it doesn't happen enough. And I see the young generation, not necessarily wanting to grasp it, but we are still in charge. We talked about this on previous podcasts, where I feel like as parents or as elders in the community, too many times we just throw our hands up because we say these kids ain't like no kids we ever seen before. And I remember hearing that all the way back in the 70s. I heard in the 80s. I heard every decade I hear that these kids is worse than anything ever. And I disagree. In my closing thoughts here, I'll say I feel like we have to do a better job of educating our youth on any and everything. Their culture, where they come from, what they should and shouldn't be doing. We need to continue to try to push for that level of respect. We say the young people don't have respect anymore. For those parents that, you got a son that's 10 years old right now, 11, maybe 12, if you're not demanding respect and haven't been demanding it, by the time they get 13 through 16, no, you're not going to get it. For those mothers out there, shout out to you for trying to stay on top of. For those dads who in their kids' life, shout out to you as well. But we know that we've got to do a better job of making sure that we fight for our own and educate our own. I can't stress that enough. It's not going to happen overnight. When you see your brothers and sisters doing things that are wrong, instead of shaking your head and saying, look at that ignorant SOB or whatever, like our number 40, I don't even like to give him nothing but a number, but our current administrator in charge of the country, he called the whole NFL SOBs if they don't stand up when that national anthem's going on. My point being, we have to take these opportunities now that people are at least open to educating themselves on the day-to-day level, as we talked about, but demanding and putting these onuses on these businesses and these politicians to do better is what we have to continue to fight for. But within that, we got to educate ourselves, because nobody else gonna do it. We got to teach our youth how to shoot free throws.
Man, I appreciate y'all inviting me up over to this process. Whenever you got another one, cuzzo, let me know. I'm always open and welcome, whenever I got time. And all I want to say in closing, man, is everybody just, stay focused, stay informed, stay active. Even if you don't feel like you Martin Luther King, get in contact with your local activists. Ask whatever you can do to support, whether it's showing up at a meeting, signing a piece of paper, and, donating $1 or whatever it takes, man. We got to do this as a unit. And let's stay focused on that root. We trying to dig till we get them roots out of the soil, for real.
Right. And the last thing I want to talk about, guys, and I don't want this to take us into a whole nother hour. I do need to wrap it up here. But the last thing I want to talk about, and Dan, I'll give you a chance if you got any last thoughts. So I've heard in the last 24 to maybe 30 hours that Kanye West is running for president of the United States for 2020. So we talking about the election that's going on this November. Kanye West, the producer slash designer slash rapper slash husband slash flat out Republican endorser, which again, you know, I'm not gonna just say because you're endorsing a particular politician, but I just want to say for you, those of you out there that are thinking that Kanye West running for president after our current, you know, president ran off of just being a celebrity reality show person, folks, don't get this twisted. This is me jumping on the soapbox here at the end. It is Soapbox Sunday. Don't get it twisted. The only thing that is being done here is what we like to call divide and conquer. If they can split that so-called black vote because y'all like Yeezys out there, I personally am not a Yeezy fan, but that's me. I'm a little older. He got a shoe out now that don't have no grip. You can see your whole foot in it, and people going crazy over it. But again, that's not my point. My point is this. Typically, when you see something like this, folks, educate yourself and know that the goal there is the current president is trying to maintain and stay in office, as we all know. Who wants to only get one term? That's a failure when you become president, that you can't succeed and do it for 8 years in this country. Kanye West running for president is nothing more than an opportunity to split the black vote and get people to maybe not vote for Biden and in turn vote for Kanye, who's running as an independent, I might add. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but just educate yourselves and know that that goal is to, you know, our current president is nervous. The numbers don't look like they're going in their favor. So I think that they have came up with this divisiveness to try to take our focus off. And in the past, these things have worked on us. They've done these things before. Educate yourselves. I'm not telling you how to vote and who you should or shouldn't vote for, but if you think Kanye West running for president, and I know that you think it's crazy because we have a reality TV star running the country now, I will tell you that this is all a crock of you know what. So just educate yourselves. Do we want Kanye and Kim running for presidency of the United States right now? You guys' final thoughts on that as we wrap up here today.
Hell no. Easy. Hell, I don't want Kanye West running his mouth, let alone running for president. I don't want him speaking for black issues. I don't want him speaking for hip hop issues. Stay a gospel rapper, Kanye. Go ahead and do your gospel music. We don't want you back in the hip hop world, and we damn sure don't want you in black issues, man.
Right. Hey, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I'm pretty sure we know where you stand. Dan, any last thoughts?
Kanye West running for president.
I had to end with it. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I think that Kanye West is no different than Donald Trump. So I think you need to be really careful when you let celebrity inspire you or woo you to the point where you think that they might have an idea good enough where that they could be running the country. I think that that's a mistake. I think everybody see that that's a mistake with Trump, except for unless you're in business, then you're benefiting tremendously. But other than that, for the people who are the masses, there's always the analogy that, you know, individually, you know, we are not as strong. If I slap you with my one finger, it won't do that much damage. But if I put all these digits together and I put them across your face, then it'll make a hell of an impact. So that's just one thing that I think we need to remember and to consider, that collectively we can do great things. But individually, we might not hit as hard, but collectively we hit much harder than we do when we're alone. So I am not a fan of Kanye West. So of course I don't want to see him doing politics. Only thing I want to see Kanye West doing is peace. I don't even want to hear his music. He can get on the beat, stay there. That's your lane. Outside of that, if he making money and whatever else he doing, that's his lane too, or whatever. But for me personally, Kanye West only good to do beats for me. I hate his clothes. I don't like nothing he got to say, but his beats always banging. So that's my point on Kanye West. My point on us educating ourselves is always, education is big to me. I think politically we need to consider where we stand, what we want, kind of make an outline of the things that we want to be passed to represent us in our communities. I think that's really, really important moving forward, is understanding politics. And I think the Democratic Party, as much as I know people hate to hear it, need a wake-up call, because you can't keep voting Democrats into office and then they have control of these committees, and they have control of these offices and control of these positions, and they don't have the time somehow to pass anything that we need. So I think it's time to put their feet to the fire and let them know that we will take our vote elsewhere if they don't get done what we need to get done. But in order for us to do that, we got to have a plan in place, and we got to have, a list of things that, we feel like we need to get done. Other than that, I'm always big on financial literacy, and I'm always big on your kids reading something, no matter what it is, because if you don't know, during the summertime, your kids, if they are not reading, they will fall behind in school. There is a lack of continued education during the summertime that a lot of Black kids face because they are not doing cultural evolving things. They're not going to museums. They're not going to the zoo. They're not going, to places foreign. They can't do it this year, but they're not going out the country learning things, or going around the country learning things, and they're not reading. So if they're not doing that and they're not keeping their skills sharp, by the time they get to school, they're falling behind. And then over time, they so far behind, they can't keep up with their counterparts that are doing those things. So my thing is, sit down with your kids, read to them, or let them read for 30 minutes a day. That's not a lot of time. That's just a little bit of effort that can go a long way if you just take the time and effort to do something like that. And make it fun. Don't make it a chore. Make it something entertaining and something that they can, learn to enjoy. And other than that, financial literacy. That's my thing. People always understanding money, understanding how to invest, understanding long-term investment, and building wealth over the long term. I think there's something else that we need to get in touch with, is not only individual wealth building, but learning how to pool our resources together and build things with each other. I think that's important as well. And like I said, other than that, get a grip and start learning how these governments work and how things work. And I think we'll be all right. But that's going to take some time, and it's going to take a little bit of effort. And it might just have to be us that kind of put our forward and build some of these institutions that kind of, guide people on which way they need to go.
Hey, man, that sounds like a soapbox statement right there to me, for sure. So as we wrap up, thank you again to our guests for joining us. We most definitely welcome you back anytime. I love your perspectives. Thank you so much for being here. You brought up some great points today. As we wrap up today and say goodbye to everybody, I like to summarize. We kind of talked about quite a few topics. I won't get into the details today due to time, because we are going on 2 hours here. But Dan, great last finishing statements there. The only thing I'll add on to it is, don't be ignorant to the ways that our youth learn today. Mm-hmm. We have to understand that they have opportunity and they learn differently than the way we did. So find ways to make it interesting, to educate them on the things that we know are important to them. We talk about reading. These day and ages, kids don't necessarily pick up a hardcover book and read. It may actually be on their device. That's how they learn now. So make sure you are, as parents and just individuals in the community that want to educate, make sure you are willing to, you know, be open to educating and finding ways to educate that'll be appropriate for our current learning styles for our youth. They learn a lot from, you know, they learn differently than we did. I'll just say that. So great points, guys. I want to give you guys the rest of your evening back. Great show again. We'd like to do this for our listeners, anybody new out there. We like to get together on Sundays and, you know, just kick it and talk about current events. We like to educate our youth, and not only our youth, but we like to educate our community. We also like to educate our concealed pistol carriers or people with the license, or we like to educate here in the state of Michigan people that want to open carry and talk about what you can and can't do. We have some exciting things coming up in the second part of 2020 with some things that we're going to be offering to our listeners as well as our customers that are looking to take advantage of our services. So stay tuned for that. Guys, it's been a great day. Shout out to you all, and hopefully everybody is trying to be smart in this heat and just continue to be courteous and love one another, man. I know it sounds corny, but I'm out here on a daily basis with some of the things I do within my hustle, and something as simple as saying thank you and stay safe mean a lot to people. You know, it'll change their whole attitude. And when you got people that's doing things and pushing you to a limit, you know, if you can avoid that situation and get away from it, continue to do it. Be safe. Everything is not being a viral video out there for you to try to prove your point. Just stay safe, and we love you all out there. And everybody have a great day. Thank you.
All right.
Catch y'all later. # reparations.
I know that's right.
Right.